Well, it's Flag Day, 2006. I should have brought my little flag. At least I made a big note on my kitchen table this morning. Hang the flag. I'm the biggest patriot in the world, and half the time I forget to bring the flag out. And I was just listening to a Vermont radio station when I was driving down here today on Flag Day 2006 about a controversy over lowering the flag to half-mast when after Kent State and a whole controversy involving the the governor and the lieutenant governor and so on. So it was appropriate that we're coming here to talk about Vermont history today. Michael, Thurston, and Missy, not necessarily in that order. How are you?
I'm good, Gordy. How are you?
I'm just fantastic. And I hope that never changes.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. Until a couple of weeks ago, I confess, I always like to think I'm in the loop. But in terms of the subject for today, the Vermont Book of Days, I wasn't in the loop until Calvin sent me an email, said, guess what? We're going to do a show on the Vermont Book of Days. And I'm so thrilled and delighted. I've anticipated this moment. And we're glad to have you come over on the ferry today. It wasn't even choppy, was it?
No, it's beautiful on
nice,
the ferry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than diesel.
Yeah, that too. And then we got to the parking lot. And by the way, thanks to Jim Murray and his friends at Comfort Inn for inviting us back again for I don't know how many times we've been here. Not in this room though, right, Calvin?
The last few have been here.
Have we?
Yeah.
We've done some really fun shows, and each one of them is historical too. In this building, and I lose track of which room we're in. They're so busy because they're ready to open a new Perkins restaurant here, and we have people running about, and the smell of the asphalt in the parking lot as they put down the new tarmac.
Yeah.
But let's get down to basics. You guys live, where do you live in Vermont?
I live in Barry. Missy lives in,
I live in Waterbury.
and we work out of Barry.
I want to know, and you're both natives? I mean, you're a native and you were brought up here in this area. Did you head off to college at some point in time, or?
Not very far.
No. Where'd you go?
I was born in St. Johnsbury and grew up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, a little town called Lunenburg.
Oh, yes.
And I went to college at Lyndon State.
Did you
in
really?
Lyndon, yeah.
Well, that's wonderful.
And after graduation, moved to Barry, got married, had 3 children. Missy's the oldest. And Missy grew up in Barry, went to school in Barry. She was actually born in Hanover, New Hampshire because of emergency birth situation. She had to be near an intensive care nursery.
I was really premature.
She was premature.
Oh, I've got a few grandchildren that fit that category. Thank goodness we have the facilities now.
I joke it was the only time she was early in her life.
Oh, Missy, now that you're here, you can fend for yourself. I'm sure you learned how to do that very, very young in life. But yeah, we have some wonderful facilities on both sides of the lake for treating people, babies who are born early. My wife, who, as most of our viewers know, has had 12 babies, all natural childbirth. I mentioned to Kate the other night, what did people do 100 years ago when they had premature babies or when they had breech births and so on? I guess a lot of mothers and babies died.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Fatality rates were a lot higher. It's interesting that a lot of the funding for the intensive care nursery at Dartmouth was provided by the children's writer Dr. Seuss.
I did not know that. I came here to get my second bachelor's degree.
There you go. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. And the reason we know that is because at some point after Missy was born, I think you were probably like 8 or 9 years old by that time. They threw a big party to celebrate either the 10th or the 15th anniversary of this intensive care nursery. And they just filled the field house at Dartmouth College with balloons and food and fun and games, and all the alumni that had been born and gone through the intensive care nursery since its inception were invited. And that was a pretty spectacular day.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So anyway, what you weren't in this profession all your life, because this business is only a couple years old. So what led up to this? What did you do for a living?
Oh my, a number of things. I was going to finish on Missy by saying that she was actually, she grew up in Barrie and went to St. Michael's College for her education and graduated in 2003. My background is broadcasting. I came out of Linden with a communications degree, did some radio, worked for a commercial station in Randolph, Vermont, WCVR, which was a Sconix Group station back in those days, the mid-70s. And I learned pretty quickly that it was tough to make a living in commercial radio in the North Country.
Why am I laughing,
as you
Calvin?
probably know.
Why am I laughing?
And so I augmented my income by forming an independent company and doing advertising work for some people. People in this area might know me from my work in the 70s and 80s. I did consulting work for one of the Snelling campaigns, 2 of the Cunin campaigns. I did the advertising work for St. Griswold for a time and for Emerald City Waterbeds in Burlington, and that material got a lot of airplay, but we're talking 20 years ago now.
That's how you pay your dues. Get it, start in the radio business and then get into advertising.
That's how you pay your bills.
But that's good experience.
Sure.
For what you're doing now.
Sure.
Because marketing is the name of the game, and that's why we're sitting here. Not to mention the fact that we want to learn a little bit about Vermont history.
Well, not only that, marketing is part of it, but the other experience that I had that I really draw upon every time I stand in the studio and deliver a script. I did a lot of theater in high school, a little bit in college, but a lot in high school. And I had a really good director. Lunenburg is such that it has no high school of its own. So they pay tuition to wherever you decide you want to go to high school. White Mountains, yeah, well, I was thinking San Diego.
Yeah, I'd have a few choices.
Didn't quite work out. I ended up going to a brand new school in New Hampshire called White Mountains Regional High School. And I went there because we lived right on the Connecticut River. It wasn't very far from us, even though it was in a different state. And my mother taught in Lancaster, New Hampshire, and it was easy to catch a ride with her in the morning to catch the bus to go to high school. We had a theater director at the high school level that was really a professional director. And he taught us a lot about children's theater and about serious classic French comedy, and it was Greek tragedy. We did a lot of stuff that was really beyond the scope of what high school typically tackles.
Wonderful.
And we ended up doing road shows with a couple of the children's plays and actually touring the state of New Hampshire on a state grant to perform these in front of school audiences throughout the state. And we ended up winning, I think in the 4 years I was in that program, we ended up winning the New Hampshire Drama Festival 3 of those 4 years, and we won the New England Festival 2 of those 4 years. So we did pretty well. And it was because he was such a spectacular director. I mean, he was obsessive. He was a slave driver. He was all of the things you hate at the time.
That's how you learn.
But that's how you learn.
We're doing interesting that we should do this on the 14th of June, 2006, just a few days after the Tony Awards. And probably you two were too busy to watch the awards, but we watched them with great anticipation because a young man whose name is John Lloyd Young graduated from Plattsburgh High School in 1993 and said he was going to be famous on Broadway. And guess what?
Jersey Boys?
Jersey Boys.
Yeah.
Frankie Valli.
Yeah.
If you turn your head, you can't tell the difference. He's multi-talented young man, and he gives his upbringing here in Plattsburgh a lot of credit. And those people who don't forget their roots are high on my list. So I was very, very proud to watch him and cheer the television set. I'm sure you've done that in the past and drop him a couple of emails. But when you were talking, that reminded me because he got some good background in this area. And then when he left this area, he got very serious about drama and singing. And the guy is just I don't think anybody knew when he went to high school here that he had that kind of a voice.
Right.
And he performed on stage, and then he did a premiere performance for the President of the United States right after the Tony Awards on that weekend. And so his wings are taking him way up into the ethers now. But that is good background.
And that is such a particular voice.
Oh, yeah?
The Frankie Valli voice.
That's wonderful.
But that show, I mean, it has gotten probably more rave reviews than any other show.
Oh, my goodness. Not only
it
won best musical, and then 2 people won Tonys, including his for the best featured actor or the best lead role. So did you pursue
We're
any
slightly lower scale.
No, come on. I'm going to put you in whatever company I can.
And I don't do Frankie Valli.
But did you pursue any of the drama stuff in adult theater or anything?
I haven't. And I think part of that is just I've been, from the time I was about 21, I've been self-employed. And I think that has a lot to do with it.
Constantly scratching.
Yeah, exactly. Finding the extra time. I'd love to do it, but it just, to find the extra time.
Who knows what? And how about you? Any acting in your?
No, absolutely no acting
No
whatsoever
music?
in my background.
Music in school?
Nope.
Isn't that interesting? You have those interests. You'll always have those interests,
Yeah.
and maybe someday you'll do something with it.
Yeah.
All that by way of introduction
Yeah.
for the Vermont Book of Days, and we're going to continue our program in just a moment. Is she really a chip off the old block? That's what I want to know. Are you your father's daughter?
Yeah, one chip, I would say.
And not a cow chip either, right?
Not going there.
I wake up in the morning, and as I grow older, I look in the mirror and shave, and I say, I am my father. I mean, I can see all of my mannerisms and the way I speak and the timbre of my voice and the whole 9 yards. And for that, I'm proud. This is part of my father's legacy to perpetuate those genes,
Yeah.
I just wondered if you feel.
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between us, I think, especially obviously in our interests. We've chosen the same thing as our vocation. We're both really interested in writing and telling stories and finding out about people and places.
I knew we would fit in well in this chair.
I would say that we genuinely have a desire to learn more about people and things that we don't know, and so that's where the passion for the Vermont Book of Days comes from. But we're both extremely emotional, which works for us and against us.
Yeah, I'm nodding because I've been in those shoes for a long, long time.
Yep.
You cry at happy things and you cry at sad things, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like you said, I don't know if it's a plague or a blessing sometimes. Because men aren't supposed to be, big boys don't cry and that whole thing.
So Frankie Valli said.
Yeah, we're back to Frankie Valli.
Well, we had to get him back in there somewhere. But I mean, those impassioned speeches that these people gave, and sometimes you can tell when they're pure drama.
Right.
And in this case, when the young man won, he dedicated it to his father because his biological mother died when he was very tiny, and he was brought up by a father and stepmother, and it was a very tender moment for him, and of course for me, sitting there watching the thing.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because you appreciate what's happening around you, I think, more. You see the pathos and the glamour and everything in a way that normal people don't see it.
I think it is an advantage.
But we're all, you said curious. We're all curious. Calvin's the same way. We like to know things.
Yeah.
That's why the minute he told me we're coming here, I checked up every link on your website, your ancestors, and every place you've been in the last few years and so on, just so I know a little bit about who you are when we get here.
Yeah.
It's good to be curious, and I'm sure people who are curious, especially about Vermont history, are going to love what you people are doing.
We hope so. Yeah. The feedback so far has just been fantastic, and that's really wonderful when you get emails from people, that they actually took the time to sit down at a keyboard and send you an email saying that they enjoyed today's story or they didn't know today's story. And that's a wonderful, wonderful
Or
experience.
tangibly write you a letter. We've gotten a few through.
Yeah.
Oh, don't you love real mail?
Remember those?
Yeah.
You know, it's just wonderful, and I have friends that I correspond with that way, because there's nothing like just writing out your feeling. A lot of people write novels that way still. People who have enough money to buy lots of good PCs, but they just want to write it out by hand. So I love letters. That's a good thing. So you graduated a couple years ago.
Yep, I graduated
with a degree
in 2003 from St. Mike's, a degree in English literature and journalism mass communications, a double major, which has really served me well. I was prepared to do a lot of research, which has happened.
Oh, yes. Well, you know, I have to interject here the fact that what you've done is first class.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's
thank you
not
very much.
something, and we've seen a lot of similar things that were not first class. Without mentioning any names, I mean, it was easy for me to see that you people just didn't throw history up in the air, and whatever you caught in this hand was June 14th and June 15th. I have to say that last night before I came here, I did June 14th because this was the day that we were going to be sitting here on Flag Day, and I wanted to see what piece of history you would have chosen last year.
Yep.
Because June 15th, 14th of this year isn't on the web yet.
Right.
And got it? And then I chose June 15th because it happens to be my birthday tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
To me. You know, I was just writing a column very late, way later than I should have been up last night, doing research for a column based on things that happened in 1937, the year I was born. People say the good old days, I would not want to go back to 1937, except for some of the good movies that came out that year and some of the wonderful songs that came out that year. But isn't it a wonderful challenge?
Oh,
to
yeah.
try to pick one thing in Vermont history that you're going to apply to that day?
Yeah.
Some days it's more of a challenge than others.
Well, this didn't start out as a book, I have to say, Missy, right? This started out, how did it start?
We started out with, it was actually, Dad had the idea for this media property that would be multimedia. It'd be television, radio, newspaper, and internet.
Might as well hit them all, right?
Sure.
And every day we would tell a different story about something that happened in Vermont on that day. And we brought this idea to the director of the Vermont Historical Society, Kevin Graffinino, and it immediately triggered in his mind this man who had been working on a similar idea for a manuscript for a book, eventually to publish a book. And he didn't know if John was still living or not. His name was John Riston, the man that we were looking to find. So we tracked him down in Delaware. He was a retired biochemist teaching.
I read that.
At the University of Delaware. Yeah. And his Vermont history was his passion, his hobby, because he had spent a lot of time growing up in Vermont, and his parents were innkeepers in Vermont, and he'd gone to school in Vermont, obviously, at UVM. He got his PhD.
A long time ago, I might
add. Right. And so we found him and told him the idea, and he agreed to work with us. He had to dig the files out of filing cabinets where he had thrown everything he had found because he couldn't find a publisher. And we take probably...
He'd given up. He had given up.
These are all familiar stories,
you
know.
He'd given up on this project.
Yeah.
I don't know about you people, but I've written enough to cover this table 40 feet deep and things that have never been published except for a few things that I write on a regular basis. The publishing business is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Especially something that's a local interest, because if they're going to publish you, they want to be able to market it. They want a really large audience to make.
You can get it done if you want to pay the price.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, he didn't live to see the book published.
No, as soon as the program went on the air, we were getting calls asking from bookstores, local bookstores, saying, "Where's this book?"
Where's the book?
People are coming in saying that they're hearing the Vermont Book of Days. where can they get the book? How do we get this in stock? And we said, well, there isn't a book. we haven't researched the stories yet. I mean, we don't have a year of stuff gathered. We're going at, we're producing as we go here. And we decided that after the end of the first year, we would put together a compilation of all 365 stories from that first year. But John passed away very early in the season before we knew if we were going to be able to publish a book or not.
I don't even think John had the opportunity, because he was still living in Delaware and would come up to Vermont occasionally. I don't think he ever had the opportunity to see any of this program in context. He came to our studios in August, probably 2 to 3 weeks before we launched. And he got to see, I think at that point we had about 30 shows done and ready to roll. And
we're talking television shows?
We're talking television and radio. And he sat in the studio for an afternoon with us, and we had lunch, and we played for him what we thought would be, a smattering of the programs, 2 or 3, so he'd get a feel for what we had done with them. And he was so engrossed in what he was watching that we ended up playing almost the entire 30 by the time he left.
Maybe that's what killed him.
So, come on, that'd be nice.
No.
I don't think it did. I think if that's true, he died of happiness, because he had this grin on his face that was just incredible. He had not done any kind of visual research. He had done text research, typical research. So what we had done with the research he gave us was to flesh out the stories, to go find the visuals, to go to these locations and film new footage on location if it was about a particular place, or
So that's what you did with it. That's what you do with the TV.
And that's what we do with the television. And
so it's not the same script you're using on radio.
It's very close. The scripts are very close. We pull the audio from the television, modify it slightly for radio. And so when we produce the television, we're always thinking toward radio, because we can't say, oh, look at this.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't look as good on radio as it does on TV.
Because one of the things that was so funny about John...
I get the humor.
Gordy looked better on the radio.
Yeah, way better. Hands down.
The old joke, you got the face for radio.
Yeah.
One of the things that was so funny about John was that he not only wanted to see the programs that he had done the research for. We were watching week after week of programs, some of which he had done the research for, some of which he hadn't, and he was just enjoying every second of it, because it was like a whole new story to him, every single one, because he knew all about the people, but he had never seen them, or he knew all about the place, but he had never traveled there.
Isn't it neat?
Yeah.
So you guys did him a huge favor, and he did you a huge favor, and it's one big circle.
I was saying to a friend of mine, it was really sad that he didn't live long enough to see the book, or to see the program and the project really come to fruition. And the friend of mine, one of the reasons he's such a good friend is because he comes up with statements like this. He just looked at me and he said, it is too bad that he didn't live to see it come to fruition, but he died knowing that the torch had been passed. And that meant a lot to me. And as I think back on that day in August before we launched the project, it really hit home, because he was, John was just in such a great mood when he left. He'd had such a good time. And I think it was really a thrill for him to have pulled this material out of a file cabinet drawer where it had sat dormant for nearly a decade and see it come to life.
And
for that I'm grateful.
Yeah. It was exciting, and it was because when we started this project and we started looking at his manuscript, and you start thinking of ideas in your head, you've got a different creative mind than his mind. You get a little nervous because you're taking years of his work, and you're incorporating that into something that you want to develop, and you're going to want to change it. These scripts are not John's scripts, and to have him watch the television and enjoy and appreciate and be proud of what is being shown and what's happening on the screen or listening to on the radio. That was really exciting and a little bit, you kind of loosen your collar a little bit. You're like, oh, good.
Yeah. Good, he likes it.
He liked it. Yeah.
He likes it.
But, so there was a certain, the guy was smart, but there's a certain humility there and a graciousness.
Oh, definitely.
I'm thinking of people who write novels, and then some other screenwriter gets the book and turns it into a movie, and some authors.
Talk to Stephen King sometime.
Oh, yeah, talk to Stephen King.
Yeah.
He's not too happy.
Yeah, exactly. There's a perfect example. You pick the cream of the crop in that respect.
Yeah.
But I've seen it happen so many times. That's why a story like this is so delicious to me. So he did see parts of it.
He did.
Now, I want to ask you a question before we go any farther. You know that you're not the first to do this kind of thing. It's been done in other states and other places, not nearly as well as you people.
Well, thank you.
But I mean, what did you use for a template? Did you do this off the top of your head and study, or did you study some of the other states that have done this?
No, I didn't study any of the other states that did this because it grew out of a project. I had done a radio special in 2002 it was the 75th anniversary of the 27 flood. And there was a woman in Barrie by the name of Pat Belding who wrote a book. And the book was a collection of 25 interviews that she had conducted back in 1977 upon the 50th anniversary of the flood. And she got survivors, 25 survivor interviews. And in those 25 interviews, there were 7 deaths in Barrie in the 1927 flood.
People don't know. I mean, to stop right here, I know a little bit about that flood, and people have no idea today how absolutely devastating they were. Besides little people like you and me who lost their lives, there were very important people and public officials and so on who lost their lives.
One of the people that died in the 27 flood in Barrie was Hollister Jackson, who was the lieutenant governor of the state at the time. Yeah. And Pat Belding found first-person witnesses to all 7 deaths in her 25 interviews.
Think about that.
And
50 years later?
And this all happened by accident. I knew her son. I knew her as well, but I knew her son. He was really who I palled around with. And because I knew him, he knew I had a recording studio in my house. And Pat had this box, literally a shoebox, full of old cassette tapes of all these interviews.
Don't you love it?
And they were beginning to disintegrate. They were getting powdery, and you know how old tapes do. And so she handed me this box and said, "Can you fix these?" And what she meant by that is, can you transfer them into a computer and clean them up and put them on CDs so they'll last another generation? I said, sure, I'll take a shot at it. It turns out that of the 25 interviews, 23 of them were very salvageable. And about 15 of them were spectacular, and they cleaned up really, really well. And as I'm doing it, I'm thinking, the 75th anniversary of the flood is coming up here in 2 or 3 months. This would make just one of those radio specials that sends shivers up your spine, because all of these people were now deceased that she'd interviewed. There's nobody left standing that actually went through the flood. And here's an opportunity with audio clips to bring today's public to a front row seat to this event that so devastated Barrie, and not just Barrie, but the entire Northeast, because of the amount of water that they got in such a short period of time. And so we went ahead, we produced it, we got the Radio Vermont group, which is a group owner of about 5 stations in Vermont, to put it on the air. We found some sponsors, and in finished form, the radio special won the 2002 AP Award.
You gotta love it.
For Best Radio News Feature.
Yeah.
So
that's important to people like me, because there are so many unsung heroes, especially in the radio business.
Well, and don't give a radio guy an award, because then he just wants to do more stuff,
Yeah, I know.
So that's where Vermont Book a Day started. I got such a reaction from that special that it planted in my mind a seed that, people really enjoyed this type of programming, because it takes them back, it teaches them things, it brings them a front row seat to something that perhaps they did, or perhaps they didn't know about. And it seemed that as far as specialty programming and broadcasting was concerned, history in our case, Vermont history was considerably below the radar. That there were these occasional specials, but nothing on an ongoing basis. And so that was the genesis of getting the wheels turning to figure out how can we do this on a daily basis in a way that it's going to make sense.
But you already had a studio in your house?
I've had a studio.
Just audio recording?
Audio recording. It's now television too. I can do television editing and radio.
So you do the television stuff in your house?
Right.
Yeah.
We go out and shoot field locations and do all the editing in the house. And it's become so miniaturized compared to what it used to be that we just retrofitted the audio studios that we had, and we layered the video stuff right on top. And now we can produce 99-track video and 24-track digital audio.
We're talking about mono track and dual track, and then 8-track and 16-track and 32-track, and here we are now.
Yeah.
Isn't it incredible?
And it's a cockpit. It's literally.
When it's digitized, it never changes.
That's right. No generation loss.
Well, I bet you Les Paul wishes he was 20 years old.
Oh, of course he does.
He's the guy that started all that.
That's right.
So that's how it started.
Yeah. That's how it started.
But the idea started when you were still in college then.
Yeah, Dad actually gave me a copy of the program because the program was airing while I was in school. You know,
the radio special.
Yeah. And I listened to it and I thought that was really neat. You know, and I was actually headed on a track toward grad school, and I agreed to work with Dad for the summer between school year and school year, and help him out making demo kits for this program and see if there were any media partners out there who would be interested in such a program. And we didn't know the footprint for anything. We didn't know if it was going to be 3 minutes long.
Sometimes it's better that way.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't know, you know, if it's on public television, then there's sponsored, like underwriting pods, but if it's on commercial television or commercial radio, then there's actual 30-second commercials. And so we had all of these footprints and diagrams and everything that we were trying to show people, all the different forms that it could take, you know, and accept us, and you know, like,
not knowing where it would land.
Here's a great idea. Is your station interested in it? And then we're gonna kind of customize
Get your Vermont history here.
Yeah.
It's like Jerry Garcia standing out on the street in San Francisco selling albums. You know.
Yep. And we didn't. I mean, we just didn't know. You know, there was no way of knowing until we got those partners in place what form the Vermont Book of Days could take, would take, and when it finally did start to drop into place, I put grad school on hold because I just didn't think I'd ever have the opportunity to work on a program where not only do you research and choose the story, you're learning how to produce for radio, television, newspaper, internet. You have the creative control, you're choosing the visuals, you're writing the story. I had never delivered a single word into a microphone. Oh, that's not true. I guess then when I was 7, I did that one line for you in the Emerald City ad. But, you know, I had never spent time in front of a microphone. And there's just
So you're actually reading some of the stuff
the
now?
opportunities.
Are you reading?
Yeah.
Yourself? Are you going on camera too?
We've done, well, we're on camera now.
Right, Calvin?
The picture part is working. You know, I mean on the show, on the regular show.
On the regular show we don't, because the footprint is short enough. You know, we're on the air for about a minute every day. The vignette is a minute long. So there's just not time. There's too many great historic images to waste time looking at us, you know.
I'm a great historic image.
But we do on-camera interviews, etc. And you know, people call and want us on camera, we'll come.
Well, we're so thrilled and delighted that you came over to see us today. Once again, we're recording this on the 14th day of June, 2006 at Comfort Inn. Thanks to Jim Murray for giving us a room in the midst of all their construction for their new Perkins restaurant here. But they've been very kind to us down through the years. And yeah, we have done some neat programs, and this would be on the neat list.
Yeah, thank you.
The neat list top 10. We like what you've done.
Well, we're having fun too.
You know, my mind is racing like the old cameras, you know, with the crank going on the side, there are so many possibilities for what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Have you done, besides the book, have you done a television show that encompasses the past year? Like, I mean, for a New Year's show?
No, we haven't.
A 2-hour special with...
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because we're in negotiations with Vermont Public Television currently to try to put together a long-form version of the program so that we would do periodic specials.
It's got to be done.
Well, that's my opinion. You know, I can give you Vermont Public Television's phone number. You can.
I cannot eat one Rice Krispie. I have to eat a bowl.
Right.
So at the end of the year, and now I will be among your biggest fans from now on. I want to see the package.
Right, and we're also, the other thing that we're considering, people have asked us to put together a compilation video. You know, to string the individual segments together in weeks or months or however we would do that, and actually put out a DVD so that they can watch them and review.
And that's not hard to do.
It's not hard to do, it's just, at this point it would be time consuming to do it, to sit down and physically take the time.
Are you a team of 2 or do you have
We're
other
a team
people?
of 2.
Yeah, well.
2.5.
Calvin knows how that works.
Yeah.
He and I talk about that very often because he has to keep that camera, more than one camera whirring, because he has to keep hours and hours of content on his television channel in the Northern Tier every single day.
Yeah.
So, you know, people, I was in a wedding, and what are people talking about? Our little corner, Calvin's television show. How many shows has he done? Why aren't they archived? Are there enough tapes to fill this room? You know, I'll see what I can do about getting a grant, because every one of those has to be. And Calvin's stock answer is absolutely nuts and bolts. I don't have time.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like it's like your friend John, who's not with us to speak for himself, with all that stuff in drawers.
Right.
My filing cabinets can attest to what this guy has done. And every now and again, I just have to throw stuff away because it gets so heavy it'll tip the room off the back of my house.
Yeah.
Because we're never going to get to publishing it.
You know, it's interesting because when I think of John and the amount of time that he spent researching for what he thought for a period of time would be nothing. Because, you know, he had this dream to do a book and it just didn't work out. And that day that he decided to close those filing cabinet drawers, I mean, the dream of the project being a really emotional part, but just the practical side of it, to close those drawers on the hours and hours and hours of time that he had spent researching all that material, thinking that it would never see the light of day.
This is nirvana for a guy like John, isn't it? It's just
Absolutely.
a dream come true. And
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking, just as I did for my birth date on the 15th, people are going to buy this book or go online and see what happened
on their
last
birthday.
year on their birthday.
On their birthday.
A million possibilities.
I wanted to point out, too, while we're on the subject of June 15th, that the reason June 15th for this year isn't there yet, it'll be there next week. We protect our media partners with the broadcast.
And you should. It's like a very famous baby that was just born in Hollywood, and somebody paid like $6.5 or $8 million for the pictures, and the next day they were on the internet around the world. Yeah, there are a couple of words that apply that we won't be saying on this program today. So I can understand where you're coming from.
So our broadcast partners get first dibs on the new material, and we just black out the current week, so that if you want to see what happens on the web, if you want to see what happens today or tomorrow, you're going to have to wait until next week to go check it.
This is an amazing age of communications that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's why the internet is so wonderful for me. I love to do research, and before the internet, I'd have to go to my public library and spend 2 weeks what I can do in 2 minutes now.
Yeah. And
just with a keystroke.
Yeah, one of the great things that's allowed us to do is, one of our goals with these programs has been to appeal to as wide a age group as possible. And the book is very, very visual for that reason, so that every story has at least one image, most of them have 2 or 3. And we want kids to be able to really involve themselves with the project as well. You know, even though a lot of these stories might be difficult for young kids to grasp, we want them to feel that they are accessible. Excuse me. And the web has really allowed us to do that, because we can create PDFs for schools, which are just 8.5 by 11.
I love that idea. I saw that and I just said amen to that.
It's
I love
fantastic. So we take the entire week's worth of stories, put them on one 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with an image for every story, and schools can download them free of charge, so that they can use them on bulletin boards, or they can just talk about them at the beginning of each class. They can do whatever they want with them. That's for them to decide, but the resource is available if they want to use it.
And for people that might be listening and watching and not know what a PDF is a portable document file that preserves the format of a page, so that when you show what this format is and what it looks like, this is not actually one of the PDF files, this is actually a page off the website, but it'll give you an idea that it's formatted in a certain way. And what a PDF file does is preserve that format, so that any school with a computer online hooked to a printer can actually view these on screen, or download them and print them and hand them out to students in the classes.
I'm sure that thanks to all this research that John did and you're now doing, that even historians are saying, oh, I had forgotten that, or oh, I never knew that.
It's one of the most fascinating experiences we had was in the formation of this show. We built a test kit list of about 20-25 people.
Oh, you did?
We did.
Ah.
And we produced a demo. It was a notebook, a big notebook.
Pretty
It
smart
had
idea.
video, it had audio, it had a sample of the column.
What do you think?
Yeah, well,
Give us your
what do you
feedback.
think?
they do it with movies. Boo if you like.
We chose media people. We chose research organizations and research partners like the Vermont Historical Society and Special
Howe.
Collections at Bailey Howe and at UVM. We chose serious historians. We chose historians that were hobbyists. We chose people that were really in the category of just sort of general public to get their reaction. And we took these 25 kits, sent them out, handed them out, you know, and got them into the hands of the people that we wanted to have them. We gave them about 2 to 3 weeks, and we started making follow-up calls. And that was one of the most interesting parts of the experience, of getting that feedback from all those different people. And I found one of the most interesting pieces of feedback was from somebody who's really heavy into history, who said, I never knew about that story at all. And that was like...
That's when you know you won the war, yes!
Yes!
I love it. It's true. Yeah, strangely enough, and it sounds like a dichotomy, but serious historians sometimes miss the boat of the fun parts of history.
Yeah.
And they overlook, you know, I was doing a lot of research. I was writing a column on what happened in 1937 on my birth date on June 15th and through the year, and seeing how it depends on whose ox is gored, what historian you're looking at, what site you're on, what they considered the most important news.
Yeah.
And they were skipping over some of the stuff that to me was tremendously fascinating. You know, and a lot of sites for 1937, and I don't mean to digress, but it's all attached. Failed to mention the Hindenburg. It happened in 1937, shortly before I was born, and Calvin knows I've got a piece of it in a cabinet at home, and so that's very important to me. So that was a real big deal for 1937. So when you said that, that's exactly right. So you knew who liked you and who didn't like you in a general way when you first started.
And it gave us lots of, one of the other telling things that I was really pleased to see is that everybody had an idea or two of what we could do to make it better, but all the ideas were different, which told me that there was nothing glaringly wrong with what we had done, because if I'd had 10 people pick up on the same thing and say, gee, I didn't like da-da-da-da-da, I would have known, oh, we have a problem there. But I didn't get that. It was all over the board, all different kinds of comments.
Well, you've improved on a good thing. As I said before, a lot of people have done this. The Associated Press has had it today in history for 100 years.
Right.
And most local newspapers have, the Press Republican, for example, has a sports look back and a history look back. And it's up to one person who sits and looks through the archives and picks stuff just like you do for that given day.
Right.
But mostly it's not Vermont history. And so you're able, I bet you've learned a lot.
I'm a native, and I thought I knew an awful lot about my state.
And I'm sure you've learned a lot.
And I didn't know anything. You know, we have just scratched the surface.
So you...
And not only not only just Vermont history, which I can't even begin to describe how much I've learned about that, but if you give me a picture now, I can tell you roughly what year that car is, you know, or where never before, when I started, I was
You've made it now, Missy.
What year?
Oh yeah, dating cars is
We love to play that game, and we have a friend, a retired Dr. John Southwick, who knows an awful lot about what cars are, and if we have an old picture and we can't figure out what the car is, we show it to John. He said, "Yeah, that's a 1937 Chevy. You know, it cost $1,312."
Right.
I love it.
But aren't the cars of the last 20 years frustrating?
Well, you know,
they all look
I talked
alike.
about that, and I thought it was my old age creeping up, but it's not true. Back in those days, you had big fins and little fins, and you had, you know, you had a lot of different ways to tell cars apart. Not to mention that the emblems were big enough and the hood ornaments were big enough, so you always knew the difference.
Yeah.
So you're having fun.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is living proof that a young person can be interested in history, because so many people of your ilk couldn't care less where they've been. And we've decried that fact over and over and over again on this program as we promote history.
Yeah.
A lot of young people are so busy in figuring out how they're going to look best when they get up in the morning, or how they're going to, you know, have the best date or make the most money, that they just disregard all of history.
Yeah.
And that's a sad commentary.
It is.
So you're changing that, I hope.
Well, I hope so too. It's one of the reasons that when we sat down to do the show, we sat down to map out the book, we really wanted it to be a very different presentation of history. We wanted it, because it's daily, it had to be bite-sized. And our thought was that the value in that is twofold. It lets you tell lots of stories. It gives you a small footprint so that broadcasters are more friendly toward giving you a little bit of their time so that you can get on their airwaves. But the other thing that it does is that it gives people multiple jumping off points, that if you give them a variety, this whole smorgasbord of stories and ideas and things that have happened in and around their state, that some of the things are going to fire their imaginations and some aren't. Hopefully the things that do, they'll use our short story as a springboard to go find out more, or to get in their car and physically go there, or do whatever it is to sort of jump into history.
Makes me want to spend a lot more time across the lake, and I've said that before, you know, in raising a huge family. Kay and I haven't had a chance to, because that lake has always been kind of a boundary, and we're hoping we can erase that.
Well, you know, it's interesting, as we do this program, we're finding that historically the lake was just the opposite. The lake really tied.
No, of course it did.
Tied everything together. You know, the lake was the super highway of its time. And, you know, it might seem a little odd that we're here in New York State talking about the Vermont Book of Days. But we do so many stories about Lake Champlain and events that really had engaged both sides of the lake, that I think that at least for those people on the eastern boundary of New York that border the lake, there's a lot of Vermont history within the Vermont Book of Days that is as much about New York State as it is about Vermont. So
there was so much commerce back and forth, and I have a very good friend who chooses to remain anonymous in spite of the fact that I'd love to tell the world who he is, who's a great amateur historian, as good as many of the professionals in this area. And it's been hard for him to tell a story because he doesn't want to identify himself. So he doesn't want to write a book. And he's like John, he has all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he called me up a couple of weeks ago and he said, Gordy, you're a good guy. I said, gee, thanks. He said, I want to share my information with you. So instead of the Vermont Book of Days, at least once every single day there's an email with a piece of North Country, New York history on it for my edification. And it's a piece from an old newspaper on how long it took to build the American flagship in the Battle of Plattsburgh, Saratoga, and how long it was. And amazingly, it was built and put in the water in a very short period of time. And I read that. It's one paragraph, just like your little vignettes, and yet it changed my way of thinking.
Yeah.
How could guys with axes and whatever they used build a ship in a very short period of time and have it end up as one of the most famous naval ships of all time? So this guy is so cool, and he's been giving me this information. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but now it's on my shoulders and will go in my filing cabinet. But at least we're talking about it today, and there are a lot of people who are amateur historians.
Yeah.
And
sounds like the beginning of the New York Book of Days.
Yeah, doesn't it? But I imagine, Missy, when you put a vignette on and it airs, some of the comments you get are from people who say, how come you picked that? When I think it should have been, didn't you know that my grandfather was born on that day? Or whatever?
Yeah, we do. We get a lot of different comments about people, not necessarily for that particular day, but lots of times the story will spark other story ideas. And we love that because finding 365 stories a year, you know, there are some days that Vermont was really not that busy. All the activity must have been in New York because Vermont was a little slow on that day. And so if we can get more stories, that's great news for us.
Yeah, and it happens exactly that way for me when I write a column. The email perpetuates more columns, and once every 2 months I'll go in, just use the letters.
Oh yeah.
To do another one. We're going to pause for just a moment, take a deep breath, and see if we're going to expire from the warmth in this room and get right back to our program on the Vermont Book of Days. We're talking with Missy and Michael Thurston. We're talking about the Vermont Book of Days, and I'm just engrossed in this whole subject because it's important. It's good for you. I can tell it's good for you. You get off on this every single day you get up in the morning.
Most days.
Yeah,
most days.
Saying, what am I going to do today, or what are we going to pick for tomorrow? And that's a good thing. I know because I read about it before I came here, and I know a lot about it because you talked about it. You mentioned that you're on a number of radio stations. Can you give me a clue as to where people, for example, who might be seeing this in northern New York, might be able to tune a radio station in to hear this?
Yeah, the radio stations that would be most likely to have signals listenable over here would be WVMT.
620,
620
solid AM signal over here.
And they broadcast a show twice a day. I'm not sure. The first one's pretty early.
Morning, something like 9:30.
I think it's earlier. I think it's like 7:15, 7
Oh, it is? I
o'clock
thought it was in
morning.
the 9-ish. I know it's once in the morning and once later on in the afternoon.
I think the other one was supposed to be around 1 o'clock or so in the afternoon.
Yeah, I've forgotten. I had the list.
And for those south of us, probably WSYB in Rutland would be listenable in parts of New York. WCVT, the FM station in Stowe, I'm not sure. That might get into New York State. WDEV AM and FM has a really powerful signal. And I think it depends on where you are, but I have listened to them in New York State, so I know that there are pockets where WDEV will come in as well. And the rest of the stations that are on
WBTN.
are probably, oh that's right, WBTN
Yeah.
in Bennington would get into parts of New York. Parts of New York that used to be Vermont. And vice versa, I guess.
Well, and vice versa. We've talked about that before, which brings me to Fort Montgomery. I don't know if you've watched that recent eBay controversy where they tried to sell our Fort Montgomery on eBay.
Yeah.
You know, did you have a feeling, Calvin, that was going to happen?
Yeah.
So did I. I mean, it's just a joke, and you would love to take the guy who placed that bid and and put him in a stockade and let people throw rotten squashes at him for a day and a half, because they got publicity, at least for Fort Montgomery, but our good friend Jim Millard, I don't know if you've ever met Jim, but he's the one that's done so much research, and he's very serious about Fort Montgomery, about as serious as anybody ever is about any historical place. And of course Calvin is too, because he's grown up around that area. And so who knows where it's going to be, but that was a perfect example. And you're on television, but you're on Vermont Public Television, and that's very easy for anybody to find on this side of the lake, right?
Right. And they broadcast the program. It gets a little dicey during pledge drives, because we're not sure where we'll end up. But normally, they broadcast 3 times a day. They broadcast the Vermont Book of Days 3 times a day. It's on at 5 of 7 in the morning. It's on at 2:25 in the afternoon, and again at 5 of 7 at night. So each episode gets 3 broadcasts.
Is it on VPR, on public radio?
No, it's not.
Get busy on that, will you?
We're working on it.
I'm a huge Vermont Public Radio, North Country Public Radio fan.
Right.
Just public radio in general. After I left the commercial business in 1997, I just, I had to drop that commercial radio thing out of my vocabulary for a while to collect my thoughts. And I still, Prairie Home Companion and all the rest. I'm just a huge public radio.
Car Talk.
Yeah, Car Talk on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. It's just one of those things, you get used to things, and it's like an old shoe, and Garrison Keillor would be delighted to hear me call him an old shoe. But now with the movie out and so on, he's just a neat guy. So anyway, if you and newspapers.
And newspapers, where the newspaper end of things isn't as well defined as the electronic end of things, but we're working on that too. As we go, we're tending to get more newspapers involved.
Is it in a daily paper now?
It's in, yes, it's in the Newport Daily Express in Newport, Vermont.
Okay.
It's in a weekly paper in central Vermont called The World. And we're working on a bunch of other things for season 3. Season 3 begins in a couple of months. And that's one of the areas that we're really zeroing in on. We want to expand the newspaper network as much as we can.
Yep.
But in this day and age, Missy, a large number of people are computer literate at long last, and it's amazing to me to see that, I hate to use the phrase little old ladies, but people who are alone at home who are now discovering that they can send emails to their son-in-law and wherever he might be, and can learn things online.
Yeah.
And how can people discover you online?
They can visit our website, www.vtbookofdays.com, and on the website we've got 365 days of archives, and they're constantly being updated. They're updated a week after they air, but the news stories slowly replace the stories from last year. And on the website they can also find information about how to contact us. They can send us story ideas, which we really like it when that happens. But story ideas, feedback, information. Some people say, I heard a story about the Magoon bootleggers, and my last name.
Great.
Yeah.
We've had lots of those.
And there's Magoons in the town, and we're trying to find out if they're related. Do you have any more information? Whatever we have, we can furnish to people who are listening and have questions. And we love it when people, email us and say, listen to your program today. Great story. Dick Snelling didn't own the company. He, he was in the process of buying the company. I know because I was his foreman for 20 years. Stuff like that is wonderful because we get feedback directly from people who are actually involved in whatever the story was.
It's fascinating for me and very encouraging to hear a young person like yourself with this tremendous interest in history, especially from their state, because we think we have a pretty neat state over here in Vermont, or New York, but Vermont is unique in so many ways. I mean, it's a little tiny state with a little tiny population and a huge reputation.
Yeah.
the word Vermont carries weight. It's like the word Adirondacks, nationwide.
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody who lives in an urban area in America would love to move to Stowe, Vermont. I mean, and so Vermont has to spend the rest of its days trying to live up to that gorgeous
That's right.
reputation, but it has everything, doesn't it?
Well, and we're finding that historically that was true as well. I think because it was bordered so much by water. You know, it was Canada to the north, but Lake Champlain to the west, the Connecticut River to the east. A lot of people spent time going through Vermont on their way to somewhere else, and as a result of that, a lot of people decided to settle in Vermont, and a lot of history happened in Vermont, and it doesn't seem to be restricted to any one zone of Vermont because of those roadways. Those waterways are really the roadways. There's history in pretty much every nook and cranny we've looked so far that is pretty significant.
And the other thing is, in terms of Vermont letting you down or Vermont living up to its reputation, one of the things that I've noticed the most isn't necessarily historically oriented, but just traveling to the different communities, some of the views that you see, some of the roads that you're not really sure you're on a road for a while, and then it turns into just this incredible vista.
Yeah, the notch is open.
Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing. And some things, because Vermont is so small, like the population is not particularly large, so many of these communities are so much fun to visit. The Vermont Book of Days would make a great travel guide just to go visit the different
I think you ought to get a big bus and paint
I think of Charles Corral.
Yeah, how can you not?
Yeah, maybe not the dual family part. The bus part was good.
The bus part is good. We've got a couple of local friends who tried that to do public television programs that way, and it's kind of neat. It's been done lots of times, but what a great idea. There is so much of Vermont to see.
Yeah.
Even though it's a relatively small state, there's just so many of these little nooks and crannies.
There's, here I am out filming all of these different communities and, these gorgeous views and lots of incredible farms and just views of the mountains and of water, etc. And, you'll come home and be like, Dad, you've got to see this shot. And the shot is this, it's called the Rupert Stadium. And it's, out in the middle of nowhere. It's no bigger than this room, and yet it's called the Rupert Stadium. You just want to show somebody because it's got so much character and tells you about this town, more than you might, be able to really feel from reading a traditional history book, But seeing the Rupert Stadium tells you a little bit about the lives of the people that live there.
Yeah. Great. Let's begin to just talk about how you got here from there. And in terms of getting all your other work done and then deciding you wanted to do a book, because this is the first one.
It's the first one.
From the first year.
For the first year.
And it's, how did you decide on the size format? Because it's a nice size. It is heavy too.
We decided on the size. We wanted to use a stock paper, so that as we're sitting in our office, we could proof the pages.
Oh, there was a practical side.
There was a practical side. We could proof all the pages at scale off of our printer, our computer printer.
Yeah, see, that makes perfect sense to me.
And we just put a binder on it, a hardbound that was a little bit bigger than the pages, and that's really what determined the size of the book.
Right.
Sounds like rocket science, doesn't it?
I expected some really ethereal and exotic reason, but you got right down to the nitty-gritty. Mm-hmm. You like to write, Michael, don't you?
I do.
Better than broadcast? Or is it a toss-up?
They go together for me, because I'm usually writing for broadcast. It's unusual that I would write for a book, because I've usually written for broadcast most of my life.
It's interesting because, I wrote for radio, anything I wrote for radio, and I did radio news for all those years. You get one chance to write it and one chance to deliver it, and you never quite get it finished before, it's 4 o'clock and we're on the air.
That's right.
And so, proofreading is out of the question. Spelling doesn't matter, you know.
I was always a big fan of WKRP in Cincinnati.
Wasn't everybody?
And one of the episodes that was my favorite was the episode where the teletype machine was dropping the letter B in everything that was printing. And so Les Nessman announced over the air that a giant lizard had just struck the East Coast.
Oh, isn't one to see?
And that, in a nutshell, describes small market radio.
But I mean, when you're attached, as you might have, you're almost old enough to remember the old-fashioned teletype machines. The clickety-clack that's
I do.
so
Yeah,
famous in television shows and in movies. And it was very easy for something to go wrong because the information came on telephone lines and anything could happen between there and here, or the machine could run out of paper, or a letter could break off.
That's right.
And when you said B, I remember that.
Yeah.
But that can happen, and sometimes, you know, you have to read way ahead to figure out what the next sentence is going to be when you have no B's. I love that. What a great idea. So, how big a challenge, did you collaborate on this in deciding what to put in the first one?
Well, not really. We collaborated on the shows on an as-we-go basis, and what the content of those shows became the book.
Yeah, but somebody had to condense 1 minute into 30 seconds. This is a 30-second blurb, right?
It's pretty close. This is the text in here is almost word for word from.
Is it really?
Yeah.
If you add at the beginning and the end, if you take any of these scripts, or pretty much any one of these scripts, if you add the Vermont Book of Days as your guide to this day in Vermont history, and at the end want to know more about Vermont history.
So the package is a minute.
Right, exactly.
Okay, I got
Exactly.
you. Let's just show people, because the inside of it looks just like one of those pages that I downloaded last night for June 14th and June 15th. And each one catches the eye. You got to decide on how big the photograph is, right?
Right.
Yeah, all the way out.
And we wanted, again, this goes back to just wanting to appeal to people, to sizzle, to make history sizzle. We wanted it to be very visual and very exciting. And one of the reviews, and I forget now who said this, but somebody reviewed the book recently in print. I think it was a newspaper review. And their comment was, it looks more like a product of Wired magazine than a traditional history book. And I took that as a compliment.
Oh, I would. Of course, I think it's great.
But I take most everything as a compliment.
Yeah. Can't focus on the negative. Can't be bothered with the negative.
If you're talking about me, I'll take it as a compliment.
But for me, it would be difficult to choose the right photograph. Especially when you're talking about things that happened in 1791, 50 years before the first photograph was ever taken, and you have to use something. So for the Bennington Convention for January 10th, 1791, what do you show? The Journal of Proceedings.
Right.
Yeah.
So who took that picture?
Can you imagine?
Did you take it? Who took this picture?
I actually scanned that. I couldn't imagine, like when I actually found this, I couldn't believe that I was holding in my hand a document, a piece of paper that was
well, that's what I mean
over
about you
200 years old.
Feeling the sense of history.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible just to know that something as easily destroyed as paper has lasted over 200 years.
And so, as your father says, if you can stir people with that photograph,
right?
Then you've created something for that day, and then you have to do it for the next day.
But you see, in the process of doing the book, we also became page designers, which was another new skill.
Well, you've been everywhere now. You can talk to the world tomorrow if you want to.
As you're putting the elements together, for starters, you're kind of stuck with those materials that are at your disposal.
Yeah.
And you've got to figure out how to make them work as best they can. And one of the biggest hurdles in the book, where I think, if we do a second book, it's going to be a little easier to do because a lot of the major design components are done.
Right.
What does the page look like? What does the header and footer look like? these little graphic elements of, you know, the lead letter,
with the letters.
the maps, the locator maps. People seem to really appreciate the locator maps.
Oh, what
so
a
that when you've
wonderful
got a
idea.
story from Ludlow or wherever it happens to be, you've got this little
where it is.
locator map that can show you in a glance exactly where that town is in Vermont.
This is so cool. And then you have a little extra. A little extra.
There are a number of stories that you cover throughout the course of the year where one of the biggest challenges in writing each of the days is usually chiseling it down to the time constraints that you need. It's a very, very short period of time. And so one of the luxuries that we allowed ourselves in the book was to do extras, where we took a story that was really hard to tell in its entirety in a minute on the radio or on television. And to blow that story out a little more, so you give people a better idea of the entire story and maybe a little bit of the backstory of in relation to one of the days that we had covered. And these extras are actually the basis that we're now talking with Vermont Public Television about doing a 1-hour special. The 1-hour special would be pulled from stories that we would consider the extras.
Ooh.
Yeah, very exciting.
Ooh,
Extremely
it's
exciting.
truly.
Yeah.
So
But it's a long road to get there. You know, finding the money, finding all of that takes a great amount of time. We've been talking with Vermont Public Television about this now for about 6 months, and we've probably got another 3 months of talking.
I really
left
almost
to go.
hit it when I said Vermont Public Television, didn't I?
Mm.
So this is, at this point in time, this is your baby, but
Exactly.
you've got a whole family of babies going.
We do, you know, and it's one of the other things that I really like about it is that it's a renewable franchise in that
Of course.
as we've gone out,
Your mama didn't raise no fool.
as we've gone out to collect stories, we find lots more stories. And, you know, we would love to do another book for season 2, the second year. And I think that if this book continues to do well, we will have the revenue to do a book 2 sometime late this year.
Who published this book?
We did.
You did.
Mm-hmm. We
This
did.
is the beauty of being in 2006. You can have this kind of a slick production without ever hooking up with a major publishing company.
That's right. I mean,
And
we
30 years ago, this was unheard of.
We went to a good printer.
Yeah, well,
we
that's
went to,
vital.
You know, we went to Queen City Printing in Burlington and presented our idea and got our computer equipment to talk to their computer equipment, and away we went.
Is that cool? My computer talks. Now you're reminding me of another guy who likes to write weird things about Vermont. Grave robbing, ghost stories.
Joe.
Joe Citro's
Yeah.
just a cool guy. And he's written ghost stories and weird happenings and things, and himself done regular radio.
Right.
I don't know if he's done television.
I don't know that he has either, but I know he's got a couple of CDs out of stories that he's read. And another exciting thing about the book is that we just got word last week that Vermont Life is going to pick up the book for distribution. So beginning this fall.
That's a coup.
Yeah,
That's
we're
a good
very pleased about that. Their next catalog, I believe, gets published late summer, and we will be in the next catalog with the Vermont Book of Days in the first year.
wonderful? And you know, for people who think, oh, who cares about Vermont history? I live in Bloomingdale. There are a lot of famous people who had direct associations with the state of Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
And all you have to do is turn almost any page and you'll see a name you recognize no matter where you live.
That's true.
Or something that you use. A ton of invention came through Vermont too. Yeah. Definitely things that you're familiar with and that you don't realize there's any connection to Vermont at all.
A lot of famous books and a lot of great poetry has been written in the state of Vermont. As you said, a lot of tremendous inventions, a lot of airplane history, a lot of railroad history in the state of Vermont.
Yeah.
Just fabulous. And you've covered myriad subjects. you know, from grave robbing to really serious stuff, and I just happened to see that one, and I had read about this B-29 crash on June 15th, even today. A lot of our memories are associated with disasters like the Titanic, the Hindenburg I mentioned, this B-29 crash, and we've had a number of serious airplane crashes within 50 miles of where we sit right here, and this just happens to be one of them.
Right.
I like what you're doing. I mean, are there any little secrets coming up that you haven't chosen to divulge until we pick this room at Comfort Inn? I mean, are there any juicy tidbits that we might find in the future?
Not really. I think the big news is just negotiating for the 1-hour specials. And in relation to the book, I think this beginning of a relationship with Vermont Life, of having them distribute, is huge news for us.
Oh, I think that's just great.
Because
so much deserved.
We have really hoofed it pretty well within the state of Vermont to get the book into places that make sense to have the book available. But it's difficult for us being self-published, having our own publishing company, and this being our first project. We don't have the infrastructure in place to promote outside the state.
You become very fast learners, though, don't you?
We try. We try.
Not fast enough.
Sink or swim.
But Vermont Life has a tremendous out-of-state
Oh my
clientele.
God! Oh, are you kidding me? I said the word Vermont has this tremendous world image, and Vermont Life, just adding one more word to the word
picture
Vermont.
book. It's the picture book that tells
So that'll
that
be
story.
great. But my point is, can you get this in any local stores in New York State?
Not in New York State. There are stores in Burlington.
Let them take a ride.
Yeah. Or, if they want, they can get it online. It's for sale online, and we'll pack and ship to anywhere.
Online at your website?
Online at our website.
You can't get on Amazon.com?
And it's not on Amazon.com, but it's at vtbookofdays.com. And we have a pack and ship operation so that, if somebody wants to order the book online, it's a secure server. They don't have to worry about their information being abused, and they can order the book. And we will gladly ship it to them wherever they are.
Yeah, I can easily think of a lot of people buying a book like this as a gift idea.
If they'd rather take a ride, I can tell you that it's available at the Everyday Bookshop in Burlington. It's available at Lenny's locations in St. Albans and Williston and in Barrie. And it's also in the Burlington area. It's also at Borders and Barnes & Noble. Have I forgotten anybody in the Burlington area?
Nope, I think that's it.
I still think you ought to go back to graduate school. Maybe you'll be 70, 75 and make that decision. So many people, we see so many people, especially this May and June, graduating with bachelor's degrees at age 83.
Right.
Getting their, just read yesterday about a guy who got his master's degree many, many years ago, finally studying for his doctor's degree, and he's in his late 60s.
Yeah.
And why not?
Yeah.
That's right.
This is a marvelous age we live in. And even though we're talking about history, all the studying you've done, you realize what trials and tribulations these people that you've talked about had to go through to accomplish what they did, whereas in this day and age, so the opportunities are immense.
There are examples of that all over the place. Probably one of the most striking is Thomas Davenport, who invented the electric motor and died pretty much penniless.
His wife, in order to insulate the motor, she ripped her wedding dress into shreds.
I didn't know that.
So,
Come on.
Yep. That's how and she took notes while he...
Is that in the book?
Yep, I think it is.
But think about
really?
that, the electric motor. Think of what an innovation that was.
Yeah, like the wheel, the electric motor.
The electric motor. And the man who invented the electric motor is from Vermont. She did. Yeah, she did.
Oh, isn't that the coolest story?
And he died poor.
Yeah.
And totally unknown for his work.
And also, another example I would say that's incredibly just outrageous is Calvin Coolidge losing his son. And his son, Calvin Coolidge Jr., died of blood poisoning because he stubbed his toe while playing tennis.
Yeah.
You know?
He didn't wear socks that day,
So
so he just had his shoes on. Ended up with a toe injury,
Yeah.
which got infected. Blood poisoning set in, and he
Which
died.
probably wouldn't happen in this day and age, but it
yeah.
happened then, and it was a terrible tragedy.
Yeah.
We got more to talk about, and we will, as our program continues.
okay.
Missy, you know, we thought it would be a good idea just to turn to a page and have you read one of these wonderful minute-long vignettes, and I'll time you. No. And that might be of interest. And you mentioned the Rouse's Point Railroad Bridge, and I thought that was a great one. What date was that?
April 22nd, 1909.
Please do it for us.
Okay. On this day in 1909, which is April 22nd, on April 22nd, 1909, the Rouse's Point Railroad Bridge was afloat from the high waters of melting snow and spring rains. Lake Champlain narrows between Alberg and Rouse's Point, New York, allowing for one of those few locations where a bridge can cross from Vermont to New York. There have been several automobile bridges at Rouse's Point, including the one in use today, and until the mid-1900s there were railroad bridges too. Weather hazards were no strangers to such bridges. Tremendous damage was caused by washouts, including the high waters of 1920, which sent railroad cars into the lake. Rail cars and debris had to be removed using railroad cranes. And there's pictures here.
That's 59 seconds, right on the money. No.
Show those.
How did
Yeah.
how did you choose the pictures?
Well, these ones pretty much chose themselves. I mean, they were so remarkable. There's pictures of the bridge, which is just a twisted gnarl of railroad crossings. I mean, it's just a mess. And there's literally train cars teeter-tottering on the bridge, like, right across. They're practically perpendicular. And there's also images of the cranes that they use to actually lift the cars out of the water, which is just remarkable to think about, and even more remarkable
97
to see.
years ago.
Yeah, yep.
And then a little tiny picture of the Green Mountain State and Green.
Right, and where the
red
location
dot.
is. Yeah.
That's absolutely terrific.
Yeah.
We had a good fortune of meeting Jim Shaughnessy, who's had so many wonderful railroad books. How many did he write, do you suppose?
He only did a couple, but he did.
I thought he did about 3 or 4.
He did two. I think he did one other book besides that on the canals or something. But yeah, he did two railroad books as far as I know.
Just the most amazing photographs of railroading you've ever seen. You think your book is heavy? These are the very large coffee table format and about this thick, about 3 pounds a piece, right, Calvin?
Yeah, the Rutland Road would be the one that Vermonters would.
The Rutland Road, and we got I mentioned Stowe. He had a summer place in Stowe. We went over there. We wouldn't even let the guy go to the bathroom. We got the cameras going. We were so excited. We talked. We're sick. We did 6 hours, 6 hours of tape while our wives were out wandering the grounds and singing songs from The Sound of Music. But what a great guy. Have you corresponded with him at all lately? No.
I saw him a couple of years ago.
Did you?
Convention.
Yeah, but just great, because railroad history.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has a railroad story.
Yeah.
And over here, especially in Rouse's Point, the hub of the Delaware and Hudson Railway and the other railway, way they went in the other direction, just terrific. So that's a great story. All right, you want to do one for us?
Yeah, I'd love
Master?
to. I can't think of the, I think it was in Shoreham, was the railroad bridge that would swing out of the way for boats. And when they would put it together for the railroad, oncoming railroad train, sometimes it didn't quite line up.
Oh, sure.
Which, you know, caused
Can you picture the guy there? Uh-oh, here come the train.
caused a few problems.
Oh.
Let's see. I'm going to read July 30th, 1954. This is about Senator Ralph Flanders. You know, recently George Clooney did the movie Good Night and Good Luck, about Joseph McCarthy and Edward R. Murrow. And Edward R. Murrow certainly was the most visible broadcaster to stand up against McCarthy during the McCarthy era.
Chain smoking, about 4 packs of cigarettes as you went, yeah.
But I think what a lot of people don't know is that politically, Senator Ralph Flanders from Vermont was the person with the backbone to stand up to McCarthy, even more so than President Eisenhower at the time. So this is from July 30th, 1954, and it's called Flanders Takes on Senator Joseph McCarthy. On this day in 1954, U.S. Senator Ralph Flanders of Vermont introduced a motion to censure Senator Joseph McCarthy. It was David taking on Goliath. Flanders had accused McCarthy of dividing the country because of his flawed investigations of communists and formations of blacklists. Flanders, a fellow Republican, was ostracized by many party leaders for taking on one of their own. Flanders didn't flinch. In December, his resolution to censure Senator McCarthy passed 65 to 22, and it was the beginning of the end for Goliath. Senator Ralph Flanders of Barnet received a public endorsement from President Eisenhower.
Flanders didn't flinch. I love it.
Flanders, yeah, alliteration? Fan of alliteration?
I think so.
Flanders was actually a senator from Springfield, but he was born in Barnet. And he's, as we do on the next page, I'll show you first these pictures, which show you Flanders and McCarthy. And the Flanders story is one of those stories that we chose to do an extra on, because as we read about him and what he did in standing up when it was the suicidal thing to do politically,
yeah,
really made him an unsung American hero.
That's great. And you did you pick yellow with any malice and forethought?
We chose yellow for all
For the
the
extras?
extras, just to have them so that they were easy to locate as you go through the book. To give them something visual
It
that
stood
was
out.
different.
It worked for me.
Yeah.
And you did an index.
Index.
Index was necessary. We do enough research where we know that any book without an index is missing its soul. So
Oh, Wes is way too heavy for me.
You stole that
Book
one.
without an
I
I love it. I love it.
Missy is the person who indexed
You did-
the Vermont Book of
oh,
Dates.
no wonder.
Yeah.
It was missing its soul.
And so it's, it makes it really nice. I can't tell you how many times since the book has been published that we use the index in this book to find things
Oh,
that
sure.
we've previously done, just because it's a very quick and easy reference to use.
It's been an interesting journey for you from the very beginning.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I always like to find out who you are, where you're from, what your interests and passions are, because I believe that everything is connected with everything else, not only events and people, but everything is connected, in the past and the present and the future. So to show who you are, what things you're interested in, you may never get that master's degree.
That's true.
You might be teaching graduate studies at UVM one of these years. Do you, that's something we haven't covered, but we can for the last couple of minutes of the show here. Are you called upon to lecture?
To some degree. We're kind of early in the curve because we're kind of new to history. We're really not history scholars per se. We're media producers first and historians second.
Yeah, we get that sensation all the time as people think we're historians because we do historical shows, and I'm embarrassed to say no, I know nothing about that.
But that changes a little bit as we go, because people, I don't know that we're called upon because they view us as authorities on history, but I think they call upon us because the project has been so interesting.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think
At schools, if nowhere else, right?
Yeah.
Have you been to some schools?
We haven't really done a lot with schools. We've done a lot more with like community organizations, local historical societies, libraries, etc. We haven't done anything really in schools.
Well, in light of the way you present your project to schools, I think it would be a great idea. You get the teachers enthused and you get the kids enthused in first, second, third, fourth grade with little tidbits, and you got the parents involved. And
But some of it is, you're back to that old tug of war. Some of it is purely time, the time to do.
Well, join the club. We know We know what that is. If there were 50 hours in a day, we still wouldn't have nearly enough.
We try to do as much as we can. You know, when somebody asks us, we make every effort to try to go do whatever it is they want us to do, whether it's to lecture or speak or do a book signing or like coming here today to do your program.
Have you done some book signings?
We have. I now know how to spell my name.
Michael and Missy Thurston, it's been a great pleasure for me. I know it has been for Calvin.
Well,
when
Gordy,
he's happy, the camera twitches a little
Yeah.
bit. People can. I met somebody on the street the other day, and she says, "Gordy, I'm sick of looking at you." And I said, "Okay." She said, "I want to see what Calvin looks like." One of these days, I'll grab the camera again and take a picture of Calvin. He's been doing it for a long time. Thanks to both of you for doing what you do and for coming over here and sharing that with our little corner, because it's been an awful lot of fun.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for having us,
Yeah.
Gordy. We really appreciate the support and the exposure, and
the
we hope some
excitement.
people in New York find the Vermont Book of Days interesting
Keep
as
us
well.
in the loop. We'll be so interested in what you do.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
very much.
to both of you. Thanks to all of our viewers for watching. And as I like to say at the end of every show, who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.